For the past 5 years, I've been trapped in this life we call game dev, and after all this time, I'm finally working on my first official game, a multiplayer FPS with destruction physics. What did you do for the past 5 years then? Let's just say, I've done a lot. Prototypes, game jams, game studios, I even tried to make my dream game multiple times, and at the end of the day, they all failed. But all of these fails shaped me into the developer I am today. I always had the drive to create and work on projects, which is where I discovered Brackeys, a common starting point for most. I did the basic cube running tutorial. From there, me and a couple friends decided to work on a project together, which leads us to my first game, The Black Mist. Alright, before we get into it, make sure to wishlist my game on Steam. It's my biggest project yet and it will be free, so the link is in the description. Now, like I said before, we were just learning. I just started programming in college, so I was definitely a rookie. We had the great idea of making a zombie game based in a coliseum, where only melee weapons can be used to defend. And let me just say, wow, this is probably the worst game anyone can ever play. We thought it was a genius idea to bring in developers and artists found on Discord and created a studios, which we called SYGO Studios. However, at the end result, the game was terrible, horrendously messy code, and a mishmash of 100 different art styles that clashed horribly together. Wizard of Time was a game some of us did for Brackeys Game Jam. When I say some of us, it really was just me and another developer and one other person who did sound and music. The theme was rewind, so we thought it would be cool to have overgrown plants where rewinding time would shrink them so you could get past them. Then some worm thingies that can kill you, somehow. The next project our studio tried to create was a pirate game we called Pirates and Plunder. We envisioned an open world single player game inspired by the anime One Piece. I had this wild idea of having mythical gems that granted special powers such as elemental control or the ability to command the undead. As if that wasn't enough, I wanted players to hire AI allies to help them in battles on land and sea. Of course, my little innocent mind thought this was doable. After a little over a year, I put a stop to the project. Surprising we even made it that far. But the game wasn't really fun, the code base was a complete mess, the art was all over the place with different art styles, since we didn't really have an art direction. But I learned a lot from character movement to animators and even AI. I still have plans on revisiting a pirate game, so stay tuned for that. Now, once I realized this was going nowhere, I decided to rebrand myself and to simply focus on being a better developer while building a community. This is where Mirage comes in. This was a game I made in a week for a video on my channel. I really liked it and let me tell you, it was actually fun. It's essentially an arcade style shooter. Waves of enemy will spawn, ranging from normal basic enemies to bosses, or at least one boss. I added power ups in the game like shields, homing missiles, and turrets, which can be picked up randomly during waves. I also introduced more roguelike mechanics like perks, which after every couple rounds you can get more health, attack damage, or even lifesteal. Designing the boss for the game was so much fun. Since the floor was made up of cubes which move up and down, I really wanted the floor to be responsive depending on the boss, so the boss could create shockwaves that knock the cubes up and down, and it was a challenge to beat. Lastly, I thought it would be a cool idea to add an online leaderboard in the game, so everyone can see the top scores and compete, but in the end the game was not balanced and the little green enemies ended up being super overpowered. Now let me tell you about a little project I worked on that never made it to being a full game, but was an interesting prototype. I wanted to create a third-person melee combat system, which turned out pretty cool. To add more depth to the combat, I created AI that were assigned to tribes, with each tribe being either ally or enemy. This led to some epic battles, and just sitting back and watching the AI fight was entertaining. This is also where I learned how to incorporate limb dismemberment into the combat system. It really made combat responsive and let alone fun to chop some limbs off. At this point, it was around 4 to 5 months since I last posted on YouTube, so I thought it would be a great idea to remake Dark Souls for a video, which turned out to be pretty fun. I was learning character modeling and polishing more of the sword combat, but I never got around to finishing it. The idea was to be a linear dungeon with a couple chest rooms and a couple weapons. I would have enemies scattered around the dungeon, then at the end would be a boss room, which is where I stopped at. Maybe later I would redo it, as looking at it now I don't really like the dungeon, but it was a prototype anyway. Alright, Havoc, my most polished and feature-rich game to date. It's my current project I'm working on and I release it on Steam, so link is in the description. On the journey of learning multiplayer, I probably remade this project like 3 times. It's a multiplayer FPS inspired by popular titles like CSGO, Valorant, and Rainbow Six. At the time, I was planning on making a CSGO clone for a YouTube video, which ended up coming out pretty decent, so I ended up working on it longer than I thought I would have. Also, another factor that helped me keep working on the project was Rylan. He ended up joining me on my game and he helped bring the game art to life, which gave me a lot of motivation to keep working on it. I really love destruction in games, so I wanted to add that into my game as the main feature, which took me lots of iterations to get right. Initially, I was using rigid bodies on each fractured piece, which 1 was unoptimized and 2 was very inaccurate when synced over clients. Now, I'm actually faking the destruction. I'm simply destroying the piece and adding a decal over it for the damaged look. And then I'm using particles to simulate the effects like smoked and flying pieces based on the material. My game also has many utilities to help breach or defend, like a C4 or a deployable wall for cover. Currently the game has 2 game modes, Bomb Defusal and Team Deathmatch, but I definitely plan to add a couple more before release. Minion Strikers was another challenge video I did with Gilbert that we never really ended up making a video for it. It was a total of 4 days where we passed the game to each other after a day with no communication. It's a fun little tower defense game where you control a van with guns as the player. This one turned out to be pretty fun and definitely could have led to something bigger or even a mobile game until the last day I trolled and added a minion who throws bananas as grenades. Definitely worth it. Magnetic Rumble was a game I made in 24 hours for a challenge video with Gilbert. The theme for the challenge was magnets, so I thought it would be cool to have an arena where robotic players compete to grab metal shards and push each other off. Despite my limited artistic skills, I managed to create some basic game art, and although the game maybe didn't end up looking the best, it was a fun and challenging project working with such a tight deadline. Overall, I've had a lot of up and downs in game dev. Other than it consuming my life, I made a lot of friends along the way, and I've been able to make some pretty cool prototypes, to soon releasing my very first game on Steam. By the way, you can wishlist that, link in description. Game dev takes a while to learn and get comfortable with, so don't give up so quickly. Till next time, see ya!